Welcome back to FFT Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and we've got a one-man mailbag for you today. I wanted to thank you guys, just for the patience. Took a couple weeks off, didn't have a couple of episodes. We're back now, though, and we are going 2 times a week. This is our time. There's very little actual football happening, but the Dynasty fantasy football world, of course, alive and well. Next week, we have a Superflex startup mock draft. We won't have any rookies in that one, but on Tuesday, we'll have the mock draft. On Friday, I have the Couch Scouts guys coming on. We're going to break down the guys that we think are the round one rookies, not round one in rookie drafts, round one in the NFL draft. So we'll obviously talk Mendoza, we'll talk Love, we'll talk Tate, and we'll talk about who else we think will be drafted in round one. We will have a ton of rookie talk coming up over the next 3 to 4 months, and I am so looking forward to it. We had a comment in the chat before I even got here. I always like it when you guys welcome me to the room with a comment in the chat. Wish you guys had more Dynasty episodes. You're going to get your wish for the next little bit. We'll have 2 episodes a week for probably the next 8 months. So definitely looking forward to that. I have some emails. I have some tweets. I would like to answer some of your chat questions. So if you have Dynasty questions, or if you can't think of like a clever question, but you're just curious where I'm at on a certain guy, you can just put his name in the chat. We will talk about him at the end of the show. One of the things, probably the most common theme, and it's not surprising, it's January. Most common theme in terms of the questions that I got were about rookie picks. So that's where we're going to start. The season's over, at least the fantasy season. Everybody's thinking about those 2026 rookie picks. So let's start with an email I got from Dave. I finished this season in my 10-team half PPR Dynasty League in third. So while I am pick number 8, I traded 1-8 earlier in the year for a 2027 first. Love that deal. But he does have a 2026 first that turned into the third pick in the draft this year. What should I do with this? Is there enough early projected talent to warrant hanging on to the pick, or should I try to trade it for another 2027 first? I'm still kind of trying to figure out where that breaking point is amongst guys that I'd rather have this year versus rather have a 2027 pick. This email from Dave doesn't tell me if it's a Superflex league or not. In a Superflex league, I know for sure I'd rather have 103 than a 2027 first. I think when we talk next Friday to the Couch Scouts, the first 3 guys we'll talk about, Francisco Mendoza, Jeremiah Love, Carnell Tate, those 3 guys we expect to be drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft. And I think those 3 guys, probably right now, the odds-on favorite, especially with Dante Moore going back to school, the odds-on favorites to be the first 3 picks in a Superflex rookie draft. I think, honestly, we're probably looking closer to 1-6 or 1-7 for the range of where we'd just rather have that 2027 first. So to answer Dave's question, yeah, I'd just go ahead and hold on to that pick and figure you're probably going to get Tate or Love if it's Superflex, and there will probably be another wide receiver there. I don't see another running back going in round 1, at least right now, but we may have 4 or 5, maybe even 6 wide receivers. We're definitely going to see the tight end out of Oregon most likely be drafted in round 1 of NFL drafts, round 1 of rookie drafts. So we'll have 6, 7, maybe even 8 players in a Superflex draft that we'd rather have than that 2027 first, especially since that's a random one. Chance sent in a message. What do you think is a fair trade for the 2026 101 in a Superflex PPR draft? Looking to package Sam Darnold and the 107 plus what else? And so I think we all expect that Superflex 101 is going to be Mendoza. I wrote about Darnold today. I'm going to publish this afternoon on CBS Fantasy. And just so you know, like, we're going to keep the podcast going twice a week. There's going to be a lot of Dynasty content coming out on the site, written content, updated rankings, mock drafts, all that sort of thing. So stay tuned there as well. But I think the way I'm looking at this class, depending on how deep it comes out after the NFL draft, the gap between 101 and 107 is going to be significantly bigger than Sam Darnold. Now, that is assuming that Sam Darnold doesn't go just play lights out football for the next 3 weeks. I guess it'd be 4 weeks, next 3 games, and win a Super Bowl. Because I think if Darnold does that, then you're looking at more stability in terms of him as a long-term starter. Remember, he had the same basically regular season success last year in Minnesota, turned into a pumpkin in the playoffs, and they were fine with moving on. I don't think Seattle's moving on next year, but if things go sour this weekend for Sam Darnold, we may really only look at him as a guy that's guaranteed to be a starter for 1 more year. So I think you're probably going to need to throw another first in there if you want to get Mendoza. I don't think I'd probably want to do that. If I could send Darnold 107 and maybe 2 future seconds, then I'd be willing to do that. But I do not anticipate that's going to get the deal done, especially if the team that has the 101 earned it. They're probably not super excited about acquiring a Sam Darnold. Ryan sent in a question: is offering the 101 this year for Bijan too much or not enough? So this is strictly a super flex question, because the 101 in a 1 QB league, I would say, is definitely not enough for Bijan. Looking at my super flex trade chart, remember the trade charts are all available over on Sportsline. We've got a super flex trade chart. We've got a 1 QB trade chart, and Bijan comes in at QB or at number 8 overall on that. So in terms of the quarterbacks, he's right in the same range as Lamar Jackson, Caleb Williams, Joe Burrow. I do not anticipate Mendoza is going to be ranked near that high. So I think if you're talking about that, Bijan's still worth more than the 101 in a super flex, but it might be a deal where you could offer the 101 and a second and be able to get Bijan Robinson. That's something I'd be willing to try. David we had one more rookie draft question. He said his rookie draft position is 108. You guys don't want to hear this list of names. Trigger warning. After drafting Denzel Mims, Terrence Marshall, and Sky Moore in the back end of round 1 3 straight years, I'm not really looking forward to reaching into this underwhelming class. What wide receiver should a target trade? I feel like I'm 1 wide receiver away. I think what you're looking for here is you're probably not going to get a wide receiver who is both good and young for the 108. Everybody else kind of feels the same about this class, I think, as I do. So at the top of the list that I'd be looking for would be an A.J. Brown. We've seen his value fall quite a bit thanks to his lack of involvement, maybe thanks to the offensive coordinator that just lost a job, maybe thanks to Brown's attitude. He'll be 29 during next season. That's an age where, listen, if a guy's been elite, we don't worry too much about a fall off at 29. If a guy has started to show some signs of decline, and I think it's debatable whether A.J. Brown has or not, then we do start to worry about it a little bit. He was wide receiver 22 in my most recent Dynasty Rankings update, which again is available over at CBS Sports. And at that age, that type of ranking, that's probably the first guy I would look for. I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't get him. Maybe you could go get someone like a Terry McLaurin and hope that, his contract situation will be better going into next year. He'll get a full training camp. He did flash and show that he's still very good. Maybe it's someone like a Cortland Sutton plus a later pick. That's kind of the range of guys I would be looking for. But again, I don't know that you're getting an elite difference maker, and you're certainly not getting a young wide receiver who is also someone that we are excited about. So I think we're probably, that 108 is definitely going to be like tier 3 at this point of this rookie class, and it's not one that we think is super deep in terms of must start wide receivers. So I think what you're thinking is like, go get a player that matters right now. What I might try to do is see if I could turn that 108 plus something else, maybe a lower end, younger wide receiver, maybe another first, and go get a truly elite, like top 10, top 12 type wide receivers. Maybe you get somebody like a Nico Collins, who had a bit of a down year this year, and hope for that bounce back next year. But it's going to take more than the 108 to get that done. It looks like we've already got a few questions coming into the chat, and so I do appreciate that. Let's see if we can grab one that is, yeah, we got one about trading the 107 to get 103. So from the chat, what would you tack on to 17 to get 103 in a 1 QB league, or would you sit tight? I'm considering Jordan Addison in 107, but that might be too much. Addison, who, like somebody we're going to talk about in a little bit, Rashee Rice, yet another, it sounds like, I don't know exactly how to define it. It sounds like it was a trespassing charge late at night. Again, not good when you're having more interactions with law enforcement after what Addison's been through already. I don't think that's probably too much because, again, I think 101, 102, 103, it may just be 101, 102, but in 1 QB, there's pretty big difference between the 3rd pick and the 7th pick. I would try to give up a little bit less than that. I might see if I could do it for a pair of seconds. Probably not going to get that done. So it's probably going to be Addison or someone relatively similar to value in him. I still like his talent, but we have quarterback concerns. We have the fact that Justin Jefferson's going to remain ahead of him. That's a concern. And then we have Addison's own off-field problems. That's also going to be a concern. His value in Dynasty right now is not as high as what his talent profile would suggest that it should be. And I do think even in this 2026 class that we've been talking about for a full calendar year, we're not as excited about this class as we were last year's class. We're not as excited about this class as we are the 2027 class. Even with that being true, I think the 3rd pick is still going to be somebody that you're really excited about. And I'm not so sure the 7th is. Let's take that first break, probably our only break today, and then I'll get to as many questions from the chat after we go through some player questions that we had from both emails and tweets.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Wanted to give a shout out to Emma. She's running the show today and doing a fantastic job. I'm stumbling all over what the trespassing was for Jordan Addison, was a misdemeanor trespassing for refusing to leave a casino bar. Is that generally that big of a deal for an NFL player? Probably not. Is it a big deal for an NFL player who's had a couple of situations already? Well, it might be. So yeah, again, it's just one of those things with Jordan Addison and with Rice right now where they're just making you feel nervous. Curtis sent in a tweet and he said, what do we do with Rashee Rice in Dynasty? And you guys have called me out in the chat a few times about being a little bit too low on Rashee Rice. It's been one of the strangest starts to an NFL career that I can remember. It was a slow start to the rookie year, and then he looked like a no doubt about it top 10 wide receiver for the last part of his rookie season. Starts off the same way as second season, then has the knee injury where Patrick Mahomes took him out on the sideline. Comes back this year. We get about half of a season of him looking like a top 5 wide receiver. And throughout all of this, there's things that we have to wonder about. The off the field stuff is obviously part of it. And now we have more of that. That's no good at all. The other part of it is he is doing this in now 3 partial seasons in a way that really no elite wide receiver ever has. The average depth of target for Rashee Rice, generally right around 5, is just not a number that we see players produce elite fantasy production year over year with an average depth of target that low. That being said, he's now done it for like 20 games, so it's getting harder and harder to doubt. I had him before this most recent news at wide receiver 9. We talked about him on the main show yesterday for redraft purposes, and Dave had dropped him down to wide receiver 11 for redraft just because he's concerned about whether Rice is going to be fully available next year. I think that's a valid concern. When I update my rankings at the beginning of February, and I may go ahead and update Rice right now, he's probably going to be closer to that wide receiver 17, wide receiver 18 range. I don't really think that you can offer advice in terms of whether somebody should sell low on this news or try to buy low on this news, because we don't have enough information. This is one of those things, and you'll hear me say this, you've heard me say this before, it's more of a risk tolerance thing. The upside for Rashee Rice is if he's able to play 17 games in an NFL season, he might finish the season as the top 5 wide receiver for the whole year. The downside is we've not seen that yet in 3 years for a variety of reasons. And now we have reason to concern that we won't see it next year. And we have a little bit of uncertainty in terms of his contract. So I think it's best to view him as a number 2 wide receiver for dynasty purposes. And it's best to view him as somebody that has top 5 upside and has a very low floor for reasons that have very little to do with football. Another guy that's kind of in that same range is Brian Thomas Jr. Kurt Chance had sent in a message. Where do you see Brian Thomas Jr.'s trade value before the NFL offseason? What if he stays in Jacksonville? What if he gets moved to a good situation or a bad one? Again, another one of those where we've got a lot of questions. I thought he did start to look more like the guy we saw his rookie year in the second half of the season. But it's extremely frustrating that we had that great stretch from Jacoby Myers, and then we had a phenomenal stretch from Parker Washington, and Brian Thomas Jr. was on the field for some of that, and we didn't get that from him this year. Now, when you're talking about a 23, 24-year-old wide receiver who has shown us the upside that Thomas did in his rookie year, and then we're talking about one bad year where he was battling through a variety of injuries, I'm generally going to give that guy a little bit more grace, a little bit more credit, and just kind of hope for the upside. Thomas is a guy who I had behind Rice. He was at wide receiver 13 in my early January update. He's also a guy that Rice may just fall behind with this most recent news. So a high-end wide receiver 2 for dynasty purposes, who I still think has the potential. I think there's a chance that we get to October of next year and he's in everybody's top 8 in terms of the dynasty rankings again. There's just also a chance that we get to early next year. And why is Parker Washington getting more targets than Brian Thomas Jr.? We're all in full-on panic mode. If I have him on my roster, I'm viewing him as a hold. I don't want to sell a player with that much talent when his value has fallen like it has over this season. If I'm thinking about buying low on him, I'm probably not giving up a good first. But when we were talking about that 108 pick, I think I'd rather have Brian Thomas Jr. than anybody I'm going to get at 108. I wouldn't give up 101, 2, or 3 for him. And I might have thought that I would going into this past year. So the value's fallen. There's no doubt about that. I'm not selling low on him. I'd be willing to buy low, but only if it cost me something that I didn't really think had the potential to be a great player. I do still think he has the potential to be a great player. He no longer feels like the sure thing he did, 6 months ago, which is sad. Speaking of guys who have seen their value fall a little bit, you guys didn't give me a lot of guys to be positive about on today's show. What is your outlook on Emeka Egbuka? He and the offense faded in the second half, and the receiver room is crowded. Is he an off-season sell based on his good first half of the season? I'd have been a lot smarter if I'd have told you he was a sell in late October, right? And I think we did talk about that a little bit. How crowded this receiver room is really depends on what the situation with Mike Evans is. But I think I was a big fan of Egbuka coming into the NFL. He showed us enough as a rookie that I haven't really lost faith in that. The structure of it, I think sometimes we worry about a little bit too much. Now, I say that, and I'll also admit that when a rookie is bad early in the year and good late in the year, I generally buy the good late in the year because we've had enough guys like Rashee Rice, who we just talked about, like Amon-Ra St. Brown at one point, lots of rookie wide receivers who break out in the second half of their rookie year. That carries over to year 2 and beyond. And maybe this makes me hypocritical, but I'm not going to hold the second half against Egbuka. I think because of the talent profile that I believed in, because of the flashes he showed us early in the year, I'm still going to view him as someone who could be an elite dynasty wide receiver in the future. I've got him at wide receiver 15 in dynasty right now. I don't know that that really provides a lot of opportunity for a sell high. And also, I think most fantasy football managers are more concerned with what's happened recently. So the idea of selling high based on his first half probably had to be done at the conclusion of that first half and not after he struggled for a couple of months. He's a hold for me, not somebody I'm looking to sell unless I could get top 12 value for him. Now, if you could turn him into Brian Thomas Jr. plus, then I would be interested in doing something like that. We had 2 questions, and we got chat questions next. So if you have chat dynasty questions, now would be a great time to get those in. We had 2 questions about Harbaugh to the Giants. Man, is anybody more excited about this than Adam Azer and Dan Schneier? Ken asked, are we selling high on Giants assets after the Harbaugh hiring or holding? And JMO said, what's the Harbaugh hire mean for Jaxson Dart? And does this make you excited about his fantasy profile? And I think before I ever knew who the Giants coach was going to be, I was already pretty excited about the dynasty profile for the Giants. Like looking at my early January rankings, I had Dart at QB 10, right behind Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert. I had Cam Scatterboo lower than that, but still I have him. Let me pull this up. I might even have to use the old Control F because I'm not finding him now. I had Scatterboo at RB 20. I have Malik Neighbors at wide receiver 5. This was before I had any idea who the coach was. So when you're talking about selling high, let's watch what happens to their value now that we're finding out who the coach is going to be, and potentially Todd Monken's going to be the offensive coordinator as well. I think those things are good. I think having a good coaching staff, having a good offensive coordinator, these are definite positives. If we get to a situation where Jaxson Dart's being valued at QB5 or QB6 in Dynasty, then yes, I would say it's time to sell high. If we get to a situation where Scatterboo is being valued as RB12, then yes, I don't know that Neighbors can get to a point to where he's a sell high. These are really interesting players because from a fantasy perspective, all 3 have shown us enough flashes early in their career that we can make the argument they're going to be elite for the next 5 years. At the same time, all 3 have at least some question marks. I think less with Neighbors, although the injuries and how much he actually likes being in New York are certainly questions, but I believe more that he is elite at what he does. Dart was very good in a really weird way, and his desire to take big hits as a rusher is a little bit concerning. Scatterboo's, I wouldn't want to say that he's insane, but watching him play football, it looks like he is, right? Like he's just ready to run through a wall. And we love that as football fans. We love that. I'm sure we know his coach is going to love that. But does that translate to a guy who can play in the NFL for a long time at a very high level? That's what we're going to find out. So I think you view Dart as a low-end QB1 with the potential, if the first month of next year looks like his best of his rookie season, then he probably does move into that QB 6 to 8 range. But remember, I'm the guy who was too high on Jaden Daniels going into this year, and we saw that sophomore slump. That's certainly a possibility. We get excited about quarterbacks when they get offensive coordinators we like, right? We also don't really like it when second-year QBs have to learn new offenses. That's a lot to put on a guy's plate after he just spent his whole rookie year mastering one system. So I think there's plenty of risk specifically for Dart and Scatterboo, but that's how I value them. Low-end RB2 for Scatterboo, high-end wide receiver 1 for Neighbors, low-end QB1 for Dart. We've got a few questions from the chat. Let's just see I love you guys giving him a little bit of love in the chat. Fantastic. Good job. Do we have an RB2 with Charbonnet? I didn't even mention, I told you guys I wrote an article today about guys who could change their value in the NFL playoffs. I didn't even mention the Seahawks running backs because I'm not sure I'll believe what happens in the next couple of weeks anyway. As of January 1st, I had Ken Walker at RB22, Zach Charbonnet at RB29. I probably should get those guys closer together or even flip it. It may be 2 weeks from now that we think Walker's better again. These guys, this is one of the most frustrating running back situations. The thing that would be best is if we go into next year and only one of them's there. But we spent the whole offseason hearing how much this coaching staff loves Ken Walker. And that didn't really come into fruition. I would be more of the mindset that if either of these guys gets elevated into top 20 status as a running back, that I would be viewing them as a sell. I'm pretty nervous about it. Maybe it's different if Kubiak leaves, goes and gets a head coaching job, which I think he should, and they bring in a new offensive coordinator who's more interested in a one-back system. That might be the situation where I get more excited about them. Right now, I would just say they are borderline RB2s. They have the potential to be starters. They have the potential to be disappointments like they mostly were this year. And if anybody values them as a must-start back, I would probably be selling. Oh, somebody wants to trade Trey McBride. Why would you do that? Would you trade Trey McBride in Dynasty tight end premium, holy cow, for RJ Harvey, Colston Loveland, and Garrett Wilson? Okay, that's why you want to trade Trey McBride. Absolutely. I love Colston Loveland. Was really kind of disappointed that I got sucked into putting Tyler Warren ahead of him for a few weeks during the season. But if you'll remember on this show this time last year, or maybe a couple weeks later than this, we had Loveland over Warren. Right now, I have Loveland at tight end 3 in Dynasty, Fannin at 4, Warren at 5. There is a gap between McBride at 2 and Loveland at 3, but that gap is not near as big as both RJ Harvey and Garrett Wilson. I would make that deal as quick. Just pause the podcast, go make the deal, come back, listen to the rest of the podcast. There's not a whole lot of that. We got multiple Travis Hunter questions. And how in the world would you expect me to know anything about Travis Hunter? Jacksonville doesn't even know where they want to play him. Aaron says it right. Travis Hunter feels like a player that may truly have the widest range of outcomes of any player in Dynasty. Yes. I 100% believe that Travis Hunter in the right situation could be a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver. I am getting more and more concerned with the fact that they re-signed Jacoby Myers. They talk like they don't want to let Brian Thomas go anywhere, and Parker Washington looks like the best wide receiver on the team. I'm very concerned that they're going to look at their defensive backs and say, you know what, we should play Travis Hunter more on defense next year. So I've got him right around wide receiver 24 right now. That's just trying to reflect the fact that his value could fall to 0 and he could be a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver. Entirely, like we said earlier with Addison and Rice, a risk tolerance situation. I don't have many questions about the talent or the ability. I think it's there. I think in Liam Cohen, the situation's going to be very good. The question is simply about, do they get a good enough offer for someone like Brian Thomas to let him go? Does Hunter force their hand because he's just better than one of their wide receivers and he ends up in this Parker Washington role or something? Like the opportunity could be there, but I feel worse about him playing wide receiver 75% of the snaps going into 2026 than I did after he was drafted. And that's certainly not a good thing. Just, I want to be clear. I don't have any concerns about his talent. I totally believe that Travis Hunter has the ability still to be a top 12 wide receiver in this league. Oof. What's a good offer for Justin Jefferson? Somebody, I hope the person asking this is trying to buy low on Jefferson, not holding him and wondering if he's getting a good offer, because Jefferson's another player that I'm simply not selling low. I don't think the J.J. McCarthy, Justin Jefferson connection can be as bad next year as it was this year. I still think he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. So I will look at the trade chart here. What's a good offer for Jefferson in a super flex 12-team league? And it would depend on whether you're a contender or not, obviously. If you're looking at picks, I'll try to think about that in just a minute. But I have him as my 23rd most valuable player on the trade chart. I've got Jonathan Taylor as a player who's just below him in value. James Cook as a player who's just below him. Assuming it's not tight end premium, I think Brock Bowers is just below Jefferson. Guys that are just ahead of him. If you're talking about quarterbacks, I've got Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love right in the same range. So kind of that low end QB1, high end QB2 range in Superflex is where I'd be targeting Justin Jefferson. Guys that I have valued just ahead of him, it's the elite, right? At wide receiver. It's Neighbors, it's Lamb, it's Genty, it's St. Brown. That kind of puts him in that range. I don't know that I will have any rookies ranked as high as Justin Jefferson. So you're probably looking at, if you're trying to trade picks for him, it would have to be multiple firsts, most likely, for me to be willing to give up Justin Jefferson. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, see if we've got any more recent questions here. Well, you got one more, don't we? What do you think of Algier? I think the running back position, Tyler Algier was the question. He is a free agent, could be leaving Atlanta. I think they've got enough free agents that he might not be a top priority. They might just replace him with a rookie or a cheaper free agent. As of right now, I think he's probably someone kind of in that Rico Dowdle territory where we don't know if they're going to be a starter. We have good enough reason to believe if they get a starting job that they can be a fantasy starter also. In this 2026 class, I might be willing to speculate on a late second for someone like Algier, just hoping that he lands a starting job. I think if he does, then, or more likely, some team gives him a contract that looks like it could be a starter, but they also draft a running back on day 2 or day 3. And so we spend the whole offseason arguing about how big his workload's going to be. So maybe an early third makes more sense. Probably a late second is what it's going to take to get that done. And if you're in a contending window and this 2026 class doesn't really excite you, I think that makes some sense. That's going to do it for our one-man mailbag, the first one of 2026. Again, there is so much content coming your way. I just talked to John Bosch. He's coming on at the end of January. We're going to do another commissioner show, talk about setting up a new dynasty league, his favorite settings, my favorite settings, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. We've got that and much, much more. We will talk to you next Tuesday.